Anyone looking to get into the Airbnb business needs to have a good handle on their expenses. Having a good handle on your expenses is what's going to determine how much money you're able to make. If you don't have a handle on your expenses, you're probably not going to make a profit, or you're going to make a much less of a profit than what you should be making. If you're not aware of your costs before getting into a property, your dream situation where you're making profit could turn into a nightmare very quickly. With over 10 years in the business and over 3,000 reviews, I've figured out very well where to cut costs and where not to cut costs. I've had every expense imaginable, from anything from busted AC units in the middle of summer to people even rolling up all my furniture and having to replace everything in the apartment. That was a long time ago, thankfully, but nevertheless, that was an experience that was one for the ages. So the first thing to understand is you're going to have different costs associated with each property. You're going to have fixed expenses, variable expenses, and then you're also going to have what I call setup costs. I consider setup costs basically anything that it takes to set up the property. When I used to have a new property, I used to go in and actually itemize every different thing and then figure out what kind of an expense this was and what that was. I just said, screw that. Now I just call them all setup costs. That includes furniture, decor, basically anything that is associated with the setup of a new Airbnb. I just create that one basket category to treat everything separately from my other items. Makes it much easier from an accounting perspective and simpler when I have my hands full trying to get set up with a new house. Now, your fixed costs are going to be things such as rent, mortgage, or insurance. These are expenses that generally don't change. You're also going to have things such as internet, cable. You could even oftentimes call gardening or pool service fixed expenses because they're generally going to be the same amount every month, but you are going to have some deviation probably in gardening and pool service because you're going to have periodic things that are a little bit different from what you normally have. But nevertheless, you can categorize those as fixed expenses also if you like. Now, variable costs, these are the things that are really going to eat into your property, and these are things that you can actually have some control over. For most of you, the main one here is going to be your cleaning expenses. This is always going to be a big item because you're going to have a lot of turnover and you have to pay your cleaners well. Another huge expense for most people, and especially myself, is utilities. Utilities have gone up through the roof, and they're always going to be very high because it's not like your Airbnb guests are going to be taking that much care and pride in turning off the lights when they leave, turning off the air conditioner, etc. Luckily, I have smart thermostats, so the AC issue isn't much of a problem, but nevertheless, people are not going to be very conscious about saving energy, and that's going to end up hurting your pocketbook. Another major expense, and this is going to depend on the property itself, but is going to be your maintenance expense. This is going to be ongoing. You're going to have to do maintenance to make sure that your property continues to operate at a high level. This is going to vary a lot though based on the property. So if you have an older property that is up in the hills or some sort of a rural property, you're going to have a lot more maintenance expenses than if you have some sort of a brand new apartment or a townhouse. That's going to have a lot lower overhead and maintenance ongoing for that property just because it's newer and because there's less things that can go wrong. Another variable expense that you're going to possibly have, not everybody is going to have this, but is pest control. You know, I have properties in different areas. Some areas are going to have a bigger pest control problem. I have to keep out bugs and critters, and in some cases even rodents if it's really a rural property. But nevertheless, pest control is important because you're going to freak some people out, and people are going to be upset if they find things such as roaches, even spiders, ants, rats, anything like that. You got to keep all of that out of your Airbnb. That is super important. Again, an older house up in the hills or something like that, you're going to have a higher expense than some sort of a brand new townhouse where maybe you don't have to do any pest control. Another variable expense, I'm going to call it variable, but we also said it could be fixed. And this is something that's going to be a little bit different for each property. And this is your gardening expense. If you have a house, there may be a large yard and you're going to have to maintain that yard to keep it in good shape. Same thing also goes for pool service. If you have a swimming pool, you're going to have to pay your pool guy and make sure that he shows up on time and he does the cleaning and does a good job when he does do the cleaning. Pool guys are hard to come by, and when you find a good one, I suggest you keep them. But nevertheless, if you have to pay a little bit more to have a good pool guy, I would do it because there's no quicker way to have to give a refund than if somebody checks in the summertime, wants to use your pool and it's dirty. Now, your goal is always to be maximizing profits. Now, you're going to have to find a balance between spending money where you need to and then also saving money in other areas so that you don't run your budget dry. This is what I call smart investments. What I mean is you're going to want to go high-low. I especially do this. I go high with some items, meaning I splurge on some items that are going to be more expensive, such as sofas and very key items I'm liable to spend a little bit more money on, and then I'm going to go lower on other items that don't matter as much. You don't want your entire property to be furnished by IKEA or Target, but you absolutely should use those stores to supplement and to fill in little items that aren't that important. Both of those stores also have things that look pretty good, but again, you just don't want to use them in abundance, and you want to mix them in with other higher end things to give a well-balanced look and a place that feels homey and people are comfortable in. But there's no need to spend extra money on designer stuff for little odds and ends and little trinkets that add to the decor of the property. That's just a waste of money. You can go to Crate & Barrel and spend $80 on some sort of little coffee table decor, but that's a complete waste. You can also go to Target and spend $12 and get something just as nice. Nobody cares, except it's going to save you money in the long run. Now, in the same vein about minimizing cost, you want to do some cost-effective things and make sure that you are able to keep your expenses down where you can. And this would be things such as smart thermostats, like I mentioned earlier. You want to make sure that your AC unit is going to shut off automatically, and you can also put some temperature locks on it. I know with the Nest thermostat you can. I'm sure the other thermostats do as well. I primarily use Nest. I also use the Alexa thermostat in a couple properties. I don't think it's quite as robust as the Nest. It's only about $50. I think it's even less than $50, but nevertheless, it's very cheap, and it does perform the smart functionality of a thermostat, which you want, where it automatically shuts off the unit when somebody has been gone for a long period of time. Now, other expenses that you're going to have and you're going to have to budget for, these are your operational expenses. These are things that are going to be ongoing and things that you have to do while you're operating your business. One of these that's going to be more relevant and higher for some people than others, but this is just restocking the property. You're going to have towels that are going to get worn out. You're going to have bed sheets that are going to get worn out. You're going to provide, at least I do, I'm going to provide snack packs for people, so when they check in, they have a nice little basket with chips and candy bars and stuff like that. And in some cases, depending on the quality of the property, then I'll even give them some Pellegrinos and that sort of thing. That's not a negligible expense. It's not a huge expense, but even then in the higher end properties, or when I have a new listing to start to really get the thing going from the beginning, I'm also going to buy a lot of wine, and I'm going to give everybody a bottle of wine at check-in. So these are expenses that I have to incur, and these are operational expenses. That's just part of the business. Another operational expense that you may have is property management. If you're not self-managing, which I guess that most people are probably doing that who are watching this video, you want to self-manage your property, but you're hiring a third-party manager to manage your property, expect to pay anywhere between 18 and 25%. So you need to factor that into your operational expenses. These are all things that you guys need to think about. There are other expenses also that may come up. And nevertheless, when you're getting into the business, make sure that you go through and really play out the scenario of that property over a period of 6 months and think about the potential expenses that could come up. This is super important. Look at the whole property as a whole. Look at the yard, look at the pool, look at the roof, look at all these sort of things, and think about things that you could have to budget for. You want to make sure that you have enough of a budget so that you can weather those unexpected expenses, such as maintenance, that you weren't necessarily expecting. So when they do arise, you're in a position to be able to pay them and not have it bankrupt you. Airbnb is hugely fruitful, that is for sure, but there is also some planning that has to go into it, and always expect the unexpected. If you haven't seen it yet, you probably will see it if you're in the business long enough. I hope you guys got some value out of this video, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do. Thanks for watching, guys.